The Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was based on President Franklin Roosevelt's belief that there are 4 pillars, 4 freedoms that we should all have access to in this country and around the world. Those are freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Those all sound so reasonable, don't they? They sound like something, well, of course, we should all have that. But not everybody in the world has that. Not everybody in this country has it. So not just putting together a declaration, but making sure we have a way to carry it out became a real priority for FDR, and then after his death, for Eleanor Roosevelt. And leading the nations as she did to put together this declaration took so long because of the different cultures in the world. Because you could say, all right, here's how 10 countries think we should carry out one of the 4 pillars, one of the 4 freedoms, but you might have some other people in the room from other cultures who didn't agree with that. So every time they walked through one of these pillars, one of these freedoms, they had to figure out how to make it real and tenable, how to make it doable for all of the cultures. So Mrs. Roosevelt leading this effort took a lot of patience, took a lot of time, and took a lot of negotiating. It takes a very special person to bring together all the cultures of the world. In 1945 and 46 and 47, that person was Eleanor Roosevelt. She was the very special person it took. This year, it's you. This year, it's you. Part of the document is fluid. Part of it, just like the US rules and regs that were set out at the beginning of this country, some of them are very distinct and will never change, and other ones are fluid and are meant to change and are meant to be amended. That's also true of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Part of the document is fluid, part of it is ongoing. There are changes and considerations being examined throughout the year by the United Nations. It's the Human Rights Council at the United Nations and the International Law Commission. People are constantly making suggestions on how this declaration can be improved. And once a year, this council sits down and reviews all of the suggestions from the previous year and says, well, that one's already been done. This one we're not ready for. Oh, but look at these. We can add these, we can change these. So this is an ongoing fluid document that I'm telling you about here. If you were to take the time to read the document, it wouldn't take you very long. It's only 10 pages long. And then you would be ready to make a suggestion. You would be ready to make a suggestion on what you would like to improve, on what you would like to change. How often does it happen in your life that you get to make a suggestion that will have an impact on the world? Okay, I know metaphysically everything you do makes an impact on the world. But I mean, something that you can write down and send to somebody that's going to change the world in that kind of a concrete way. It doesn't happen very often, and it doesn't usually involve the United Nations. So this is kind of a good thing that you have access to. Only about 10 pages long. Some of the changes that have been made in the past, and some of these will probably be amended even more in the future, have to do with environmental concerns and women's rights, apartheid, LGBTQ topics, labor laws. All of those are in the amendments already. More to come. Your idea might be exactly what the council is looking for. This is a real living document. Last month, I had an opportunity to read a memoir. Another book that's been sitting in my house for a long time. Sidney Poitier's memoir. It's called The Measure of a Man. Not a new book. It came out like 20 years ago, but I just got around to reading it. Another fascinating person with a fascinating life. He wrote a lot about how his early life, not having much at all in his family, living on an island in a little tiny town, changed him and set him up for what was to come. Because his upbringing, even though you might look at it and say, well, they didn't have much, had everything he needed. Had everything he needed to have a confidence and a firm grounding in who he was and what he could be. And you know, I've talked to you before about seeing everything through a lens of purpose. So when I read this, I was really inspired. And that's why he wrote the book, to inspire us all. In fact, that was part of what he felt, the inspiration to share a message about a sense of self. And there is a quote in the book that I want to read to you, because I wouldn't take the chance of trying to memorize it, that I thought was so cool, and I want to share it with you. You don't have to be something you're not to be better than you were. I'll say that one more time. You don't have to be something you're not to be better than you were. The call is there, and what you need is there already. You have it, and you don't have to change anything about yourself to be better than you were. You just have to take what you have to work with and who you are and make improvements from there. And the betterment comes with the tools you already have. That's the thing that happens in transformation groups all the time. People come into the group saying, I know I need to make a change. I know there's something I need to do that's different than what I did before. And they search and they search and they search, and we talk about it, and we have big conversations, and we have meditations, and we have prayer. And then they reach the point where they say, I know what it is. And I say, what? And they say, well, it's kind of what I've been doing all along. Well, of course it is, because you're who you are. And it's often exactly what you were doing all along, but you're seeing it through a new lens, and you're giving it new meaning, and you're giving it a sense of purpose. But it's not drastically different. It's just a new level, a new depth of understanding of who you are and what you already have. We're already who we want to be. We just have to uncover it. We just have to uncover it. I'm kind of a space geek. I am fascinated by the science of space. I don't understand a single inch of it, none of it. I have no idea how science works, but I'm fascinated by it anyway. When was it? July, around the middle of July, I went to the planetarium in Sacramento for an event that they were having. It was the first anniversary of the James Webb Telescope and its work. And I went, and I gotta be there for this. This is just so cool. We saw photographs from space that had been taken just 2 days before we were there. I mean, think about that. These suns and moons and planets are light years away, and we can see the pictures in 2 days. A lot for Photomat to learn about. Just a couple of days. I grew up with the space race. NASA and I were children at the same time. My dad was an engineer in aerospace, some part of aerospace. It was so top secret that he never told me what it was. I still don't know. He didn't work for NASA. He worked for one of the contracting companies and just never talked about what he did. I just knew it had something to do with space, something to do with rockets. And so maybe that's where my fascination and lack of information really began. So obviously when somebody says, it's not rocket science, I say, oh, but it is. It really is. We lived on the East Coast. We lived near an Army facility called the Apidone Proving Ground. They were always doing a lot of work in some of the information that was included in the space race at that time, the material and aeronautics neighborhood. There was our next door neighbor, worked for Aberdeen. My dad was working in aerospace. It was quite a neighborhood. Every once in a while, we'd get a phone call saying, okay, they're going to try to break the sound barrier, so get ready. There's going to be a sonic boom at about 10:30 this morning. And we tell our neighbors, we couldn't tell them how we knew. We just told our neighbors, and we'd all wait for it. We'd all wait for that big noise. It was quite an exciting time to be a kid, and quite an exciting time to be surrounded by all of those early mysteries of space. Being a little kid in that environment, when I was about 4 years old, I was just enthralled by that term, outer space. What is outer space? Just as one little 4-year-old couldn't quite grasp what it means to be a Supreme Court justice, and another little kid couldn't quite grasp what it meant to be Eleanor Roosevelt, I, at 4 years old, couldn't quite grasp what outer space meant. I was hearing all the aeronautics people around me talking about planets and stars and turbo power and all of those good topics. I had no idea what they were talking about because I didn't know about physics. I didn't even know about anatomy. So I, in my 4-year-old brain, thought, if outer space has to do with planets and stars, does inner space also have to do with planets and stars? Am I filled with the same kind of depth and darkness and stars and planets inside me? Does a 4-year-old know? I thought that was a possibility. And I kind of had a sense of wonder about that myriad of stars inside me. Isn't that the ultimate metaphysical question? What am I made of? What's inside of me? What do I do with it? Self-exploration, a spiritual journey. It wasn't until much later that I realized that I should ask other questions. You know, there was one other thing that occurred to me too. I knew where outer space, actually, I guess I knew where inner space started. Inner space would start with my skin, right? My skin, and everything deeper than that would be my inner space. That meant, to a 4-year-old, that outer space would be anything beyond my skin. You are all in outer space. How does that feel? Good. We all want to know what's inside of us, what makes us tick. We also all want to know what's out there that we can do, that we can have an impact on. The deeper we look, the more we understand human rights at its most significant level. Because we know what's inside of us, the mystery that is inside of us is really not that different than the mystery of what's beyond our skin. And that's where that interaction with other people, that understanding of human rights, and that true depth of understanding of equality, that's where we can really have an impact. We can't let other people give us racism, sexism, ageism, any kind of abuse or neglect. We have to stand up for human rights in our own way, always. If you see something, say something, right? But the other part of it is not just to look at the negative side of that. Let's acknowledge the positive side of it too. When we see something being done right and really expanding and extending human rights, let's talk about that too. Let's say so. Let's stand up and acknowledge it. And look within yourself. See what you're made of. See what your own desires and expectations are from your life. And then look very, very hard at how you can give those to everyone around you. So, to review, get a copy of the International the Declaration of Human Rights. It's very easy to have access to. In fact, there's a website that can give you access to it. It's called EleanorLives.com. That's so easy to remember. Eleanor Roosevelt. The document is a living document, lives.com. It's .org, though. Sorry, I gave you the wrong information. EleanorLives.org. It tells you what the document entails. You can read it. You can decide how you want to make suggestions to change it. And while you're there, look for the galaxy of lights. Look for the galaxy of lights. I won't try to describe it to you, but look for it while you're there and add your name to it. It's kind of a cool thing to do. Second, remember that human rights is part of your inner space and part of your outer space. And third, remember those wonderful words from Sidney Poitier. You don't have to be something you're not to be better than you were. And together we say, and so it is.